Before going to the Fairsang mansion, Sophie and Elizabeth texted Mitchell about what to do next.
Not meet. We go left. Text if anything.
Stand by in main hall. Careful.
Sophie put her mobile phone on silent mode, put it back to her bag. After entering the Fairsang mansion, they chatted with Albert for a while. After that, they asked a maid.
Excuse me, where is the bathroom?
It is at the end of the corridors on both sides, next to the stairs. You could see a door there, that is quite noticeable. You do not need to go up or down stairs.
I see. I'm sure I won't be lost.
Elizabeth pulled Sophie to the left. Sophie turned back and confirmed.
Just go there and we can see it, right?
Yes, it's right next to the stair. May I show you the way?
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure. We should make our guests comfortable. It would not be appropriate if we show places where only servants are allowed.
Do the servants live in the basement?
No, but the utility room and the laundry are in the basement. Mr. Fairsang always tells us not to show those dirty and dusty rooms to our guests. Here.
I see. Thank you. Sorry for bothering you. You must be busy tonight, with so many guests here.
You are welcome. Please feel free to tell us if you need anything. I hope you can get you revelation.
The maids left, leaving Elizabeth and Sophie standing in front of the door. The girls looked at each other and went downstairs quickly. At the end of the stairs was a door. The two listened carefully in front of it. Failing to capture any sound, they pushed the door and entered. Once they entered, they found themselves in a laundry room, with a few washing machine on the right. As the machine ran, the whirring sound filled the room. The laundry room had good soundproofing. Both Sophie and Elizabeth didn't hear a sound when they were outside of the room. There were racks and several baskets on the left. Nothing special. There was another door facing the entrance to the laundry room. They could see plenty of racks with a lot of boxes on them after opening the door. It seemed that that was the utility room, next to the laundry room.
Let's check what do we have here. We could find the ceremony room if we are lucky enough.
Let's go.
Once Elizabeth closed the door gently, the sound of the washing machines from behind her disappeared immediately. The utility room was quite large, so they split up. Soon Sophie found a wooden door. She tried to open it, but it was locked. Sophie carefully observed the direction and concluded that the utility room might be located right under the multimedia hall.
Is this the ceremony room?
Not sure.
Elizabeth knocked on the door and pushed, but the door didn't move. She heard nothing behind the door.
The prophet is not here.
Maybe. Perhaps the one who are in the ceremony room can't hear us. After all, this is a soundproof room, we may make a mistake as well.
Then where can it be? If we are wrong.
Sophie placed her hand on the door and closed her eyes.
There are so much fear, pain, and sadness behind the door. I can already sense them with a glance.
Abel was tortured in the ceremony room, and this is the ceremony room's door.
As long as we can't open the door and go in, we can't be sure about it.
Then what? Can we go through walls using magic?
That isn't magic that human can use.
Then we go back.
No, there is another way. I can try to see if there is any soul here.
Really?
But I need some space, it's too cramped here. Let's go to the laundry room.
Leaving the utility room, Sophie took a black cloth from her bag and spread it on the concrete floor. She took out an iron bowl and placed it on the cloth. She stuffed it with a large handful of dried unknown plants and lit a fire.
Take my hand, Elizabeth. You should be with me so that you will not be counted. If there are souls around here, no matter if they are ghosts or souls of the living or whatever, the ashes will tell us.
Small flame danced in the bowl as Sophie closed her eyes and drew some kind of symbol on the cloth with her finger.
The more powerful the souls here are, the bigger the ash piles are, and the number of ash piles will indicate the number of souls here.
Being a little bit nervous, Elizabeth pressed her lips together. This was not the first time she had seen Sophie use magic, but the vibes made her nervous. She stared at the fire. The flame consumed the plants at high speed and then extinguished themselves. Elizabeth was stunned for a moment.
So, this is...
Sophie opened her eyes. The ashes in the bowl are roughly divided into 3 large piles. As she looked closely, she could see a very small amount of ashes in a corner of the bowl, far away from the other 3 piles.
3, 4.
As Sophie pondered how to interpret the result, Elizabeth's phone vibrated, and she hurriedly fished it out and checked. It was a message from Mitchell.
Maid to the left.
At the word from Mitchell, Sophie grabbed the 4 corners of the black cloth to pick up everything at once and grabbed Elizabeth's hand.
We have to go. We can't go up there, to the utility room.
How can you be sure?
No, I can't, but we must hide.
Indeed, they could be easily seen by the maid if they went upstairs. The utility room seemed to be a better hiding spot than the laundry room, which had no place to hide. The 2 girls walked quickly to the utility room. Elizabeth looked back before entering and unexpectedly, she saw ashes fallen to the floor. Sophie might spill some accidentally while walking. Sophie also saw the ashes. Black color was noticeable on the concrete floor. She glanced at the door, gritted her teeth, and dragged Elizabeth into the utility room. She closed the door behind her, and they hid themselves deep in the utility room. They could see the door through the spaces between the boxes on dozens of racks. They stared at the door with bated breath. Time passed slowly, as if even a single breath was infinitely lengthened. After a while, someone opened the door to the utility room.
What happened this morning already annoyed Mr. Fairsang so much. I don't want him to know about it. Sweep it quick.
The maid said heatedly. There was another maid shouting behind her.
I'm doing. It's just dust. Why are you so nervous? If the butler sees it and thinks we burnt something here, we'll be in big trouble. Mr. Fairsang might think we caused the fire this morning as we were careless. Screw it. Who the hell brought ash here? Can it be the girls? The girls that the butler told us to keep an eye on played with fire here. No. They went to the toilets. Is there any more ash in the utility room? No. Strange.
As she said that, the maid walked into the utility room. Sophie and Elizabeth could hear her footsteps. If she took 2 more steps, she would see 2 unexpected guests through the spaces between boxes. But the maid left after taking a glance, seeing nothing unusual. Once she closed the door, silence returned to the room. Elizabeth sighed with relief and leaned against a rack nearby. The rack was surprisingly light. When Elizabeth leaned against it, the iron legs of the rack made an ear-splitting sound on the floor, scaring Elizabeth and Sophie into staring at the door. The room remained silent for a long time. Elizabeth's phone vibrated again.
The maid back, safe?
Elizabeth quickly replied, "S." Sophie then took off her shawl and tied it around Elizabeth's waist, then crept back to the main hall to meet Mitchell.
Is everything okay?
Suddenly, Albert came forward.
I haven't seen you all night. Is anything wrong?
Oh, this. My apologies. It was rather embarrassing. I'm really sorry that I had to keep Sophie with me for a long time because of this.
Albert was confused for a moment. See the shawl around Elizabeth's waist? He suddenly understood what was going on.
I'm sorry. I don't have any women's clothes here. I can ask my servants to give you their clothes if Miss Sybeth doesn't mind wearing their clothes.
It's fine. We can handle it, but thank you for being warm, Mr. Fairsang.
No problem. You are welcome. The ceremony is about to begin, so please take your seat. If you need anything, please feel free to go out and talk to the maid.
Sure, thank you.
Albert went into the multimedia hall.
How was it?
It's a bit complicated.
Okay.
Everyone entered the multimedia hall. Albert switched off the lights and began the ceremony without further ado. This time, the prophet was already inside of the ceremony room. The prophet was tied securely to a chair, with a blindfold over his eyes and 2 white stickers in a round shape on both sides of his forehead. Both stickers were attached to a machine next to him. At the sight of this, Sophie, Elizabeth, and Mitchell were filled with numerous bad suspicions and questions. Elizabeth leaned against Sophie in fear. Sensing her fear, Sophie quietly hugged Elizabeth's shoulder.
Sir, please chant the incantation.
The prophet in the ceremony room heard Albert's voice and immediately cursed.
Let me act.
The prophet screamed. His body uncontrollably convulsed. His muscles tightened because of the pain of the electric shock. He kept twisting his body to escape from the inescapable pain. The prophet struggled and stomped harder, but the sticker on his head did not fall off and the chair did not fall, despite of the prophet's effort. Trembling and clinging to Sophie, Elizabeth turned her head away not to look at anything. Sophie and Mitchell witnessed his resistance. Being too stunned to react, their minds only brought them the image of a fish being thrown ashore and left to die, slowly giving up in the end. Albert continued giving the prophet electric shocks and repeated what he had just said. The prophet took a couple of breaths. Probably knowing that he might not be able to survive the next shock, he slowly opened his mouth.
The superior being of omnipotence and omniscience, may the diminutive fool ask you for your wise answer. Please guide the trivial creatures, and bring answers to their doubts and worries. The fool will always remember you and offer you rich sacrificial offerings. Great being, the fool will give you everything.
Repeating this several times, the prophet bowed his head feebly. His voice grew lower and lower until the prophet could say nothing more. Silence surrounded the multimedia hall. When the trio looked around, they could see the eyes of the audience focused on the frail man, gleaming with excitement. What frightened the trio wasn't the ruthlessness of Albert, nor the tragedy of the prophet. It was the frenzy of the audience, who had been doing nothing but watching or even adding fuel to the flame, which terrified the trio. Albert seemed to be waiting. His green eyes were staring at the prophet, as if waiting for his next action. Sophie and the others thought the prophet was moaning, but the next sound that came out of his mouth frightened them. A deep voice came out of the prophet's mouth. All the people in the hall had heard the prophet's voice before. They knew that the husky deep voice that they were hearing then was definitely not the prophet's own voice. The prophet raised his head a little. At that moment he was laughing contemptuously at all who was hearing his voice. The being that controlled the prophet kept laughing in a low voice. If someone heard that voice only, he or she would think it was a courteous gentleman laughing in a friendly manner. In this situation, however, everything only served to inflate the fear in people's mind without limits. When the prophet stopped talking, Albert turned on the light in the ceremony room. Under the white light, the prophet kept smiling, but the laughter gradually became a whisper, and finally he bowed his head again and became silent. Albert turned off the camera and announced the end of the ceremony with a satisfied smile.
The prophet performed well tonight and should be able to deliver revelations to you tomorrow. I will be here tomorrow night to welcome you all.
As he said this, Albert looked at the trio, unknowing if he did it deliberately or not. They left in silence.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. I was just so scared, I didn't expect.
None of us has ever expected it.
I can't imagine they would do that. That's what happened to Abel and Alice.
Abel must have resisted at first and then he was forced in this way until he went crazy and died. During those 2 weeks, Alice must have been.
That's too much for tonight. Let's get some rest and we'll discuss what to do tomorrow.
No, we can't do that. We need to connect the information we have before Pharaoh's arrival, so that we can gain his trust tomorrow afternoon.
Elizabeth, are you okay?
Yeah. Don't worry about me. Sophie's right. We don't have much time. We need to get this done and get him out of here as soon as possible.
Mitchell was silent for a while, then said he needed to take a shower first. The girls went to take a shower too. When they came out of the bathroom, Mitchell was already waiting in their room. Steam was rising from 2 cups of hot chocolate on the table in the room.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I'm not good at comforting people. I have seen how crazy and extreme people can be before, but what just happened still gave me chills. I can't imagine how shocked you are, so I guess you might need something that can help you relax.
Elizabeth took a couple of sips of hot chocolate and Sophie held the cup to warm her hands.
What about you?
I'm fine. That was unexpected, but I'm fine.
Elizabeth turned to her bag and found a bar of caramel chocolate. She stuffed it into Michael's hand.
Thank you.
Has your headache gone away?
I don't feel it once it became midnight.
Well, then, put yourself together, let's get started. Today we were supposed to investigate two things, the last prophet and the current prophet. Before that, we should talk about what happened. Albert Fairsang learned a magic which allows people to communicate with a transcendental being from a magic book. However, he could not use it, so he found someone else who can use the magic for him. Then, he found the last prophet.
Abel Inisser, aged 18, suffered in ceremony before dying of heart failure.
The Inisser family have learned some magic as they could contact the witches at that time. As a result, Abel's psychic power was stronger than that of ordinary people. Then for some reason, Fairsang learned of Abel's ability and offered Abel a job with a high salary. He used excuses to keep Abel in the Fairsang mansion.
Alice said that Pharaoh had something to do with this. Although she said this with personal emotions, I think she wasn't lying. They were good friends. It is possible that Abel told Pharaoh that he had strong power, and then Pharaoh told his father about this. Pharaoh may not mean to harm Abel. You see, Pharaoh let Abel go, didn't he? And he told Alice that he wanted to help. That means that he didn't mean to lead to that consequence. Therefore, I think that Pharaoh knew Abel's ability by chance, and then he told his father about this, meaning to harm no one. When we see it in this way, I'm curious about Pharaoh's opinion. Now, we know that Pharaoh is hostile to Albert Fairsang. Apart from this, I wonder how does he see the whole thing, and how does he see Abel?
Those notes, songs, and drawings.
Exactly. Well, I don't know what's your opinion about this, but after hearing your findings, it seems to me that Abel liked Pharaoh. Abel fancied him.
Mitchell glanced subconsciously at Sophie, who was drinking hot chocolate while listening to Elizabeth.
I don't think there is anything special about that. And I don't think we should gossip now.
I don't know. Yeah. Sounds like I'm gossiping about dead people. It's weird.
I don't think it's gossiping. When I hold those drawings, I do feel delightful feelings, worship, love, adoration. The paintings, the diaries, they all carry genuine emotions.
Sophie's perception can't be wrong. Even if they were not lovers, they could not be described as normal friends.
Oh, yes. Sophie, as a witch, can you use ceremony or magic to find out what had happened before?
I'm not as skilled, not as my mother and grandmother, who could read minds, summon spirits, retrace the past and foretell the future.
It's okay.
So back to the point. Pharaoh and Abel both valued each other so much that Abel would help if Pharaoh needed it, right?
Reasonable.
We've been here for 2 days. Have we seen Mrs. Fairsang?
We can visit the cemetery or just ask Pharaoh tomorrow.
Here's my guess. If Abel can communicate with ghosts, then it's possible that Pharaoh talked to Abel about the dead and Abel talked about his powers, right?
So Pharaoh's mother died and then Abel proposed that he could talk to Mrs. Fairsang for Pharaoh? And then Pharaoh told his father?
I guess, yes. An unsubstantiated guess, though.
But a reasonable one.
So, the next point. Did they know how much they meant to each other? Was Pharaoh's feelings for Abel equal Abel's feelings for him?
The feelings in those things are pretty much the same.
Pharaoh cherished Abel. If he finds out he caused Abel's death and how much he meant to Abel, will he feel guilty? And will he be more motivated to help us get revenge on his father?
It depends on Pharaoh's personality. We can't have a reckless helper. We need him to make good use of his role to help us investigate the ceremony room.
I don't think Pharaoh was a reckless man. If he was reckless, he would not give in and leave the town, but would have an argument with his father. He would not cover his caller ID when he called Alice as well.
Assuming that Pharaoh is a calm person who also values Abel, to what extent will Pharaoh's decisions and actions be influenced by his emotions once he knows about Abel's feelings? Can we use this to make him cooperate with us? Well, we do have to think carefully, and if he doesn't believe us in the end, we still have appeal to emotion.
Also, it's just my personal feeling but, Ferone, who failed to save Abel and then was forced to leave, has the chance to return only until now. When he tries to seize this opportunity to save the person he wants to save, he learns of the fact that the person who meant so much to him died a month ago. It must be terrible news for him. When I think about this, I feel sorry for him, no matter what he has done, or he hasn't done.
It's not helpful at this point, so let's continue. Abel may have been willing to perform the ceremony at first, however, when he didn't want to cooperate, Albert threatened him with electric shocks. As the ceremony can make people crazy, Abel suffered both psychologically and physically until 6 months ago. Ferone found Abel and then let him go. As to why Ferone couldn't guarantee Abel's complete escape from the town, I guess it was probably because Ferone had to face his father as well.
Then Abel returned home, Alice learned of her brother's condition, Fairsang came on the next day to take Abel back. And finally, Ferone was sent away by his father. I guess Ferone was being watched by his own father even when he was out of the town, that he could not intervene in this matter. Otherwise, he could not have been unaware of Abel's death. Alice attacked Albert in revenge. However, she was captured by Fairsang and was forced to perform the ceremony. He must have used the same way to compel Alice to do so.
Unlike Abel, however, Alice failed to perform any ceremony. This is the end of Abel's story as the last prophet.
And then the current prophet. I guess he doesn't know much, judging by his condition tonight. I guess he's an outsider that Albert tricked into coming here from somewhere. By the time he realized that something's wrong, it was too late.
What happened tonight was a recurrence of Abel's tragedy.
If this continues, he will end up like Abel.
We know so little about him. We need to find him first. We may need Ferone's help with that before we can investigate what he knows, what he experienced during the ceremony, and any other useful information.
And finally, tonight's findings.
The situation tonight was, the ceremony succeeded but the prophet didn't understand the message, wasn't it? That means, it was not the true nature of the ceremony.
Right. I don't understand the language. Do you understand it?
I don't understand it neither. I have never heard of that language.
As neither of you understand it, thinking in the other way round, doesn't it prove that it is a language used only by ghosts and demons?
The devil's language? Amazing, truly. It's a shame that we can't understand what it said. Tonight, it is the most worth mentioning that the prophet is getting closer and closer to the inhuman beings in the ceremony. Therefore, we don't have much time and the prophet's situation is getting more and more dangerous.
This ceremony may help to strengthen one's psychic power. We may be able to discover more next time.
However, this didn't happen to Alice, so the current prophet has some potential. One day, he will be able to do what Abel could do.
So we have to stop Fairsang before it gets to that point. Have you found the ceremony room yet?
Sophie explained what happened tonight.
That's suspicious.
Similar to the door you found on the first floor. Only Ferone and Fairsang, no, probably, only Fairsang, could open these two doors. And thanks for setting that fire this morning so we didn't get caught.
Ah, ha ha. Maybe it was because the maids were not cautious from the beginning. If Fairsang saw it, he would have gotten you both.
You're right.
If that door leads to the ceremony room, then the ceremony room will probably be located right under the multimedia hall, basement level 2, but these are minor things when compared with the result of my magic.
That's the magic of soul detection, isn't it?
Yes. I still can't understand that result. Was that 3 souls, or 4 souls? If 4, then what were they?
The result of this magic varies according to the strength of the soul, am I correct?
I'll show you now.
Sophie quickly set things out, lit the fire, and told Mitchell and Elizabeth to put their hands on her body. When the flame was extinguished, the ashes in the bowl didn't form any pile, but laid on the bottom of the bowl ordinarily, evenly.
The innkeeper is the only soul here.
Sophie poured the ashes away and repeated the ceremony. This time Mitchell and Elizabeth didn't touch Sophie. The result was roughly 3 piles of ashes.
And this was the outcome at that time.
Mitchell poked, making the ashes into the shape Sophie described.
Yes, that's right.
That's quite different. I'm thinking about something unrealistic.
I am thinking about something unrealistic too.
The 3 large piles weren't the souls of human beings. And the small pile here was the prophet himself.
Agreed.
The couple, their friend, and the prophet himself.
Why so many?
Assuming that there is no guards, the prophet was tied up in the ceremony room. If the room is really behind that door, then this will be the only explanation.
What are we going to do with this?
I don't think we should mind the demons. We should think more about what to do with Farsang.
He's already suspicious of us.
He should be suspicious of me first, and then you too. I was acting too conspicuously. He probably believes that I am that kind of people who would do everything to gain knowledge. In fact, most of my family are exactly this kind of people, and I am not an exception. He worries if I will just take the book out of his hands and destroy everything he have built.
So tonight, he was trying to warn us.
Yes, he might want to work with this as well.
He wants to work with you.
Then I want that book being given to me, but now it's more important to stop him first.
Wow, long-term thinking. But let's just focus on tomorrow first.